This is California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance. I'm glad you're with us today. On this episode, we'll be speaking with California State Senator Carol Liu. Then we will be joined by California State Assembly member Mike Ng. And after Mr. Ng, we'll be speaking with Janet Chen. She is a member of the Garvey Unified School District. But first, we start with State Senator Carol Liu. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Sure. I want to speak with you about a topic that is often ignored, and that is poverty. I recently read an article in the Los Angeles Times which said that the nation's wealth gap, the rich-poor gap, is at its highest level ever. It's very disappointing. It really is very disappointing. I mean, I'm just saying it so simply.
Right. You know, it's an understatement, what you just quoted. It's, you know, during the 60s when the assassination of Kennedy, and then Johnson was our next president, and he managed to pass the Civil Rights Act, and he had a campaign against poverty. Why should the richest nation in the world have poor people? And so I conducted recently, because I read not only that article, but I was stimulated by some other articles in other New York Times, et cetera. And I just was curious because we have come through a horrendous recession, and all of the states have been suffering through their budgets, et cetera. So we have been cutting our safety net, creating a larger gap because we've been unable to help people who have lost their homes, lost their jobs.
It's interesting because when you look at the California state budget, discretionary spending is really but a small part.
Very small.
And so when the legislators are required to cut, it's usually from social welfare programs.
And education. That's the biggest part of the budget.
And so that's hurts the neediest amongst us.
It does. And so I was curious as to what's going on. So I used my district, and we went on a 3-day tour. We started my district in Burbank at an agency called Burbank Temporary Aid Center, and it was interviewing a man, a client that got ill, lost his job, and then lost his living area. And by the time he got better, he was homeless.
What's interesting is that when we think about bankruptcies, you know, there's this myth that it's because people are running up credit card debt. But as I understand it, what studies indicate, it's healthcare crises.
Healthcare, in this particular instance, healthcare that he couldn't afford to pay because he didn't have insurance from his business or from the people he was working from. And so this particular agency was able to help him out in a temporary basis. It was a kind of a spot-on thing. Found him some housing. He got his health back. He's back working part-time, but it's been a struggle. So we went from there over to the Jewish Center out in Van Nuys,
which I understand does not I guess you could say discriminate. It's not just for Jewish people. It's for
It's for all folks who come in, and it's actually a food bank. So people can gather food to take home. And actually, food was a major center of this tour because when you're poor, you may lose your car, your house, you don't have a job, etc. So food is the essence of what sustains us. And so on the tour, we're a group of people from various food banks, some researchers. We had interesting enough, Stanford University has a center on poverty, and we had the researcher come with us on the bus, and other social service providers, and some staff people, legislators, to find out what is going on. So we went from Burbank to Fresno, which has the poorest zip code in the country, and we stopped at a homeless shelter for youth, young people, that also as an adjunct, had a charter school there to make sure the youth got their education, etc. And then we spent the next morning going to the Fresno Food Bank, and then we were on the bus. And we had lectures from various folks.
That sounds inspiring, actually.
It was. You know, it was inspiring. But Maison was on the bus.
Oh yes, I know the organization.
Right.
Yes. It's a hunger organization.
It's a hunger organization, right? So Maison was on the bus, and the most interesting thing that I was struck with was that, you know, we know that churches and nonprofits and foundations are concerned with this also, and they give a lot of resources to try to curb hunger, poverty in this country. And Maison said, you know, even with all of this, it touches just 3% of the total problem. So there is a role for government to serve as a safety net for those who cannot provide for themselves.
And what's amazing is we forget that there are both adults and children and seniors who are hungry.
Yes.
Hungry. I mean, this is America, and there are folks that are hungry.
Yes, we determined, you know, this tour was geared toward the seniors.
Okay.
And we know there are over 135,000 seniors in our midst that skip a meal a day because they simply cannot afford it.
And I know as a corollary that there are many seniors who skip a dose a day.
Yeah.
In terms of medications.
Medications.
And so that can be equally as devastating to one's health.
Absolutely.
So what did you take away from this
Well,
trip?
we saw some programs in Oakland who do more case management style. They come, you know, people come in and talk about their issues, et cetera, and they try to case manage it, you know, try to give people a pathway out of this situation.
I want to ask you, when we look back to the 60s and we think about poverty in the 60s,
right.
I think it's fair to say that most of the poverty fell upon individuals of color.
Right.
What do you see today? Because as I understand it, color is not as relevant.
Nope, it's not. It affects everybody. And you know, when I was growing up, you know, people that were poor were not only because of the Dust Bowl in the 30s and things like that,
of course.
but usually folks that were down and out were people, veterans, and people that had mental illness, and generally men, as opposed to women and children. And we're seeing today in our homeless shelters more families, more women and children, and we have many school districts that have children who are homeless that they try to educate.
It is unbelievable to think that a child can go from a shelter
right.
to school, and I have to be honest with you, I know one. I have a friend whose sister has struggled with addiction, living in a shelter, yet the child's going to school. I mean,
right.
in the end, it's a triumphant story because
right.
I'm getting chills thinking about it because it is inspiring. But there is a tremendous sadness for me, and it's not a sadness based upon political party and what we're not doing or doing. It's really based upon we're all Americans.
It's really part of our fundamental humanity, or their lack of. And you know, it's something that we all should be concerned with, not only in government, but
right.
in nonprofits.
So is there a message you can provide us in terms of if we want to help? If there's anything we
can
do?
You know, we've been thinking about this because we're going to do this again, and my role today is just to bring it to everybody's attention because it's not a popular subject matter. People don't want to hear about it. They don't want to deal with it. They have enough problems of their own trying to deal with themselves as opposed to trying to save the world.
It's interesting and in some ways sad. I think about John Edwards, who was the vice presidential nominee in 2004. He has really fallen into shame because of his shenanigans, but he focused upon poverty in a very significant way, and it's sad that he has not been able to continue on that path because of his picadillos, you know, for lack of a better term. But it really does
right.
make me sad. You know, not the politician, but the man did have a platform.
Right, he did have a platform. So we're in California. We're going to take that little mantle here and try to do something about it because there are so many nonprofits and foundations, et cetera, trying to coalesce around these issues, and there should be some good coming out of this in terms of trying to deal with this in a fair and good manner to help people.
Carol Liu, thank you so much for joining us. Our guest has been Carol Liu. She's a member of the California State Senate. When we come back, we'll be speaking with Mike Eng. He is a member of the California State Assembly. I'm Brad Pomerance. We'll be right back on California Edition. Welcome to California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. I'm glad you're with us. Over this half hour, we'll be speaking with Mike Eng. He's a member of the California State Assembly. And then we'll be speaking with Janet Chen, who is a member of the Garvey Unified School District. We start with Mike Eng. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. And I want to speak with you about foreclosures in our state. It does seem that foreclosures may be dipping a bit, but I saw a study from CoreLogic that 30% of California homes are still underwater. So we are facing tremendous challenges in our state.
Brad, just for openers, every 13 seconds, a family loses their home in America. Oh. In California, 500,000 to 700,000 families underwater or headed. We had to do something, and that's why this Homeowner Bill of Rights, Assembly Bill 278, was seen as a step forward in the right direction.
So let's back up if we can for a second and set the framework, because earlier this year, the federal government, I guess the federal government was part of the coordination, but 49 states got together and engaged in a settlement agreement with the major mortgage holders, $25 billion foreclosure settlement. It was very, very significant. California was a beneficiary of that in a very big way.
Absolutely. California, thanks to our Attorney General Kamala Harris, negotiated $18 billion out of the $25 billion national settlement to go to California homeowners that were disadvantaged because they could not get a legitimate procedure for a loan modification.
So let's talk about the Homeowners Bill of Rights, because that law, which has passed and has been signed, goes beyond the settlement. It really, in a lot of ways, is quite forward-thinking and a forerunner. For example, I believe there are 4 points. I want to ask you about the concept of dual tracking. What is dual tracking?
Yes, Brad, that's an excellent question. Imagine, if you will, going to a car dealership and you're negotiating with someone about that brand new car that you want. You're just about ready to sign on the dotted line, and someone goes on the lot and drives it off. What you then discover, as we have about mortgages, is that while you're negotiating with Henry, who works within one department of the bank, someone else is preparing the papers to actually force you to leave your home. And that's what dual tracking is.
I mean, literally, as I understand it, you have someone negotiating a refi at the same time in the same institution they're preparing foreclosure.
Absolutely.
And so that had become very frustrating. And as I understand it, California is now the first in the nation to prohibit dual tracking.
Absolutely.
Also, part of the concerns that came out of the mortgage foreclosure crisis was this concept of robo-signing. What does that mean?
On its face, robo-signing is simply where you have a computer or someone that signs a signature to a document that has never been vetted. It was not as much of a concern in California about that particular practice.
Oh, really?
However, what we took from the national settlement was the practice of using unvetted documents to kick someone out of their home. And that's what we're saying, is that a document that is either based on false information or is probatively a false document cannot be used in the process.
And so in California, no robo-signing.
Absolutely, you cannot use faulty documents to evict someone from their home.
Now, I've spoken with friends, colleagues who are trying to go through a refi process, and what they have said to me was, it is so frustrating because I keep getting sent to different people in different departments. And they would think that they had a negotiation concluded, and then someone else would pop in, a different person, different department. That's going to change.
Absolutely. It's called the idea of a single point of contact, a very, very basic premise. If you had an order at Sears Roebuck and you called repeatedly, you would have a file from someone that knew what your order was about. Making an airline reservation on 4 or 5 different days, same thing. But with many of the financial institutions, you were passed from one person to another who had no idea what the previous person said and who required new documents or did not even keep track of old documents that were sent in, and then you got forced from your home. We're saying single point of contact. We're calling this SPOC, the Dr. Spock clause.
Law in place, set.
Absolutely.
There's one point, the 4th point, that has caused a bit of controversy, I think it's fair to say, and that is under the Homeowners Bill of Rights, the homeowner has a civil right of action for banks, mortgage institutions that may violate the law. There is a concern about frivolous lawsuits. So talk to me about the civil right of action and the concerns that have been brought up about whether it can cause frivolous litigation.
Yes, to those that are concerned about lawsuits, we say that this legislation actually will cut down on lawsuits. This bill does not create a new civil right of action. It's based on previous cases and previous legislation. By that I mean if there is a problem with the house, the procedure, the single point of contact, the dual tracking prior to the sale of the home to someone else, then there are no damages. It's simply an injunctive relief that can be sought. If the house has already been sold, there has to be actual economic damages that are demonstrated. So we believe this really narrows the focus for lawsuits. It will cut down on frivolous lawsuits, and it will give homeowners the relief that they really need.
I want to talk to you about a plan that has been floated in San Bernardino County. It's quite innovative and really goes beyond what anyone ever would have expected. But the foreclosure crisis is very acute, especially in the Inland Empire. And what San Bernardino County is floating is a plan that would allow the county to take mortgages by eminent domain and restructure them. The banking institutions have gotten very nervous about this plan because all of a sudden it's unclear as to the future of a mortgage if an entity can actually take it by eminent domain, being a governmental entity. What do you think of this plan?
Brad, I don't begrudge anyone who's frustrated with the mortgage crisis and seeks to have some solutions. I think this solution that's been proposed has two problems. I think there's a legal problem based on some of the case law that has actually scuttled eminent domain in almost any legislation that I've ever seen. And secondly, I think there's a political problem. So I think with those two problems, I don't think we're going to see very much of that particular remedy.
At the same time, the crisis continues. Yes, maybe it's getting a little bit better, but give us a sense of what you're seeing on the street and whether Californians are aware of and are taking advantage of the Homeowners Bill of Rights.
First of all, mortgage issues are related to the general economy. In the last several months, California has led the nation in job creation, and that's really where our focus has to be. Grow the California economy, create those jobs, maintain those jobs so that homeowners can afford to pay their mortgage. That's the first point, the big picture. I think secondly, California used to lead the nation. 7 out of the top 10 cities were leading the nation in foreclosures. That is a declining number now, and I am somewhat happy to say that we're no longer leading the nation in foreclosures.
The flip side, though, is that the banks have gotten so nervous that it's getting difficult to get a loan, even for those that have stellar credit. And so credit is still very tight. So on the other side of the equation is people can't buy homes because the banks, their requirements are so tight.
In California, I have not found that to be the case. In fact, it is currently a seller's market because for every bid on a available property, especially the higher end ones or the middle to higher end ones, there are 10, 20 purchasers. So I think the market has corrected itself simply because the demand is there and banks know they have to compete. And if they don't give a loan, someone else will give them a loan to that particular potential buyer.
You're ending your final term in the Assembly. How do you feel?
I feel great. I think this has been a wonderful opportunity to serve the people of California, and as our previous governor said, I think I'll be back.
I hope so. I'm Brad Pomerance. We'll be right back on California Edition. Welcome back to California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance. I'm glad you're with us still. Our guest is Janet Chen. She is a trustee with the Garvey Unified School District. She's also a candidate for the City Council in Rosemead. I presume that Garvey covers Rosemead. What else does it cover?
Garvey also covers Monterey Park, South San Gabriel and San Gabriel.
I want to talk to you about a sister school district, and that is the Englewood Unified School District. Not that far from your community, maybe 30 minutes up the road. As you know, that school district had to be rescued by the state of California. It was on the verge of insolvency, a la Stockton, a la San Bernardino.
Right.
What do you make of that, especially since you are an officer in the Los Angeles
County School Trustees Association.
Exactly. Okay.
And that is a school board. That is a school association of about 91 school boards, and Englewood is one of our members.
Right.
I really feel for the Englewood School District. They are, you know, a lot of times people don't really understand how many decisions actually get made within a school district and how many different factors and variables that can affect their budget. And I really, my heart goes out to them.
And as I understand it, yes, you can point to a variety of allegedly poor financial decisions, but they faced declining enrollment, they faced the budget cuts that all school districts have faced.
Correct.
So it's easy to point fingers and say, you did this wrong, you did that wrong. But the bottom line is, they're I think one of 12 school districts that are on negative certification, and countless school districts are on qualified certification by the state superintendent of public instruction. Am I right?
Yes, and there's a big reason for that too. When you're looking at the way schools are financed in California and the amount of mandates that we have,
right,
there are a lot of that decision makes it extremely tough. And so I feel that, you know, they've got a tough situation, but I think that they're going to come through. In the end, I believe that their administrators care about children just like anybody else.
And is Garvey in dire straits? I presume not, but maybe it is?
A couple of years ago, we were also in the qualified certification.
Okay.
So we understand very well declining enrollment, the amount of money that you have to pay into pensions.
Right. We'll talk about that.
Yes, and just a lot of the decisions that have to be made that are fiscal decisions.
But as we speak today, is Garvey still on qualified certification?
No, we are not.
Which is impressive. I mean, there are a lot of very reputable school districts, LAUSD being one of them, that's on qualified certification. So it's not as if it's this badge of dishonor. I mean, these are challenging times, which brings me to two initiatives that will be on the ballot in November.
Right.
Proposition 30, supported by the governor, would increase sales tax by 1/4 cent for 4 years, increase income tax on the wealthiest for 7 years. That's competing against Prop 38, which would increase income taxes on everyone by 0.4% to 2.2% on a sliding scale. What do you make of these two initiatives?
Well, I think that the school community understands that what if it doesn't pass?
Meaning Prop 30?
Prop 30. And the issue is, you know, looking at school closures, we're looking at so many issues that I don't even want to think about at this point, because it's just going to be devastating. I mean, we're looking at, look at what happened in Chicago, right? With school closing for 6-7 days.
And what I have heard, the governor has said that if Prop 30 does not pass, the school year could be cut by 3 weeks. I'm not taking a position on Prop 30. Obviously, I'm a neutral journalist. But the bottom line is that the parade of horribles, if Prop 30 doesn't pass, is long.
Right.
And what I'm wondering is this a scare tactic? Because we often hear parades of horribles if X doesn't pass.
I think school board members like myself, we live in that kind of world. We live in a realm where we always know there's always some kind of chaos, there's always some kind of crisis going on, and we deal with that. This situation coming up in November is with trigger cuts in the middle of a school year. We can't even say that it's not going to affect not only the students, the parents, and the community, but along with the businesses and the contracts that we have within.
But here's the challenge: is, you know, we see the same polls, and the polls I have seen have Prop 30 hovering in the low to mid 50s. Prop 38 not as strong, but Prop 30, you know, low to mid 50s. Well, the cigarette tax in June was at 60%. Around Election Day, and it lost with 49.7%.
Right.
So the poll numbers don't look very positive, one could argue.
We know that Californians don't like to be taxed.
Right.
But at some point, whether it's with triggers or not, people are going to have to understand that we all have to pay our fair share and be able to fund what we truly believe is a priority.
But at the same time, you have Prop 30 on the ballot. You have Prop 38 on the ballot.
Yes.
You have Los Angeles County seeking an extension of a transportation tax. You have the Amazon tax having just kicked in. You have a lumber tax. You have a fire tax. I mean, there are a lot of taxes that have just kicked in or are about to kick in. How do you go to your voters and say, give me more money, please?
That's one of the reasons why we're looking into bonds, and these are local bonds, because I think that our voters are they drive by the schools.
Is there a bond on the November ballot for Garvey?
No, there is not. Okay. But we are definitely looking into it, like other school
I
districts.
want to ask you about another issue that has caused tremendous contention, and that is the question of teacher evaluations. As you mentioned, there it was a strike in Chicago. 350,000 students were not able to go to school.
Right.
And one of the main points of contention was whether standardized test scores could be considered as part of the evaluation of a teacher. I believe that in Chicago, they are allowing those standardized test scores to be a part of the evaluation. I think it's 30% of the score. Here in California, we're not quite there yet. There are some pilot programs. There's a court decision that suggests that maybe it's required to be part of evaluations. What do you think about this debate?
I think that we have to find some sort of measurement in order to evaluate. And I think that test scores obviously have to be part of that. The same question could be asked about merit pay, about incentives, and how do we get our teachers to improve their skills? How do we get them into the 21st century? We're looking at, technology now into the classrooms where children know more than the teachers do. So I think we have to expand that discussion. It can't just be about using test scores.
Well, I think there's no doubt that people on both sides of this debate do not believe that test scores should be the sole basis upon which to evaluate a principal, a teacher. But there are some teacher unions out there that do not want standardized test scores to be at all considered. Where do you come down? You, as I understand it, you think there should be at least part of the calculus.
It should definitely be part of that equation. I think that we're also looking at, teachers obviously don't want to be evaluated that way, because they know that from year to year they're going to get different kinds of kids, and it's not a consistent way.
So right now, what is Garvey doing? I mean, are evaluations do evaluations include standardized tests?
As of right now, no, they do not. But we are looking into it and developing it on a local level.
What about the notion, and I've heard this floated before, that bonuses be paid based upon improved test scores?
That's another discussion also, because then what is it that are you going to use? I would suggest that we use a merit system in which you look at different factors. For instance, 1 year you're looking at creativity, one year you're looking at classroom management, 1 year you're looking at test scores.
Innovative solutions. My question is, can you get your unions to agree? Because I'm not a union basher, I'm not a union supporter. All I'm saying is that they can be very strong at the bargaining table.
Well, I would say that I'm a pro-labor person also, and I would think that we would have to come together in some way, and sometimes it would mean a change in leadership, in union leadership.
We'll have to see what happens. Her name is Janet Chin. She is a trustee on the Garvey Unified School District. She's also a candidate for the City Council in Rosemead. That election will be held in March. My name is Brad Pomerance. Thank you so much for watching Charter California Edition.
Thank you.